So we will be recording this training. We will also provide, there's closed captioning for folks that need that. We will also be sending out a recording to the training as well as all the materials, the slide deck. We always post that on our website, and we will send an email out to everyone. At the end, we're also going to have a short survey just asking you how it was for you, if there are other questions you have, which will help us build future trainings. So I know folks are just starting to roll in. I think we'll get started just because I know everybody's got a lot going on. So I want to introduce, we have Denise Clark and Gina Bills from the County Office of Education, and they are going to be providing our training today. They will have a slide deck, we will have a recording, we will get all of this to you after the training. You can, Gina and Denise, once you introduce yourselves, will you also just let folks know how you'd like to take questions? Some folks want them in the chat, some folks have sections to ask questions. So if you can address that as you introduce yourselves, that'd be great. And I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I'd like to welcome everyone to the How to Support Families with Children or Unaccompanied Minors webinar. My name is Gina Bills. I'm the Education Liaison here at the Contra Costa County Office of Education, and I'll be presenting the majority of your content today. I'm joined by one of my colleagues here at the county office, so I will turn things over to her and have her introduce herself to all of you.
Good morning, everybody. Denise Clark, also with the Contra Costa County Office of Education Youth Services Department. Previously worked in Gina's capacity as the County Homeless Education Liaison. And my new project is I'm supporting the Homeless Education Technical Assistance Center, which is a collaboration between the California Department of Education and 3 county offices across our state. And so still working very closely with supporting our local county, as well as supporting 24 other counties across the state with homeless education and support for families and students. Good morning and welcome.
Thanks, Denise. So this morning's webinar is interactive, so we'll definitely be hearing from all of you folks today and want to get your thoughts on some situations, on a few scenarios that we'll be working our way through together. So I really appreciate your input during our time together today. As far as questions, we will be periodically checking in on the chat, and Denise will be fielding questions as well. And then once all of our slides are finished, we'll have about 20 minutes or so for open forum and Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. So our time together today, it's our hope that by the end of this training, all of you will have a better understanding of how to take the educational needs of children into account when placing families in housing. We'll also discuss how to inform families with children and unaccompanied youth of their educational rights as part of your intake process and procedure. What is and isn't required for children and unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness. And finally, we'll talk about how to coordinate with the CoC, the Department of Social Services, County Office of Education, the McKinney-Vento Coordinator and Educational Liaisons, and other mainstream providers as needed. If we could just ask everyone to keep their mics muted, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay, so the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. A little history on the act. It was signed into law back in 1987 and was originally known as the Stuart B. McKinney Act. And the Stuart B. McKinney Act said that all states needed to review and revise the residency requirements when homeless children and youth were enrolling in school. So initially it was created to address all the problems that homeless children were facing, not only when enrolling in school, but also attending and ultimately succeeding in school. So a couple of years went by, and then in 1990, it was amended as the McKinney Act, this time requiring states to eliminate enrollment barriers to education and giving schools support for academic success. Well, then 4 years went by, and this time the McKinney Act included ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It also added services for preschool. It was started asking for parental input and finding out what parents would like to see and what was needed at school sites, and really put a bigger emphasis on interagency collaboration. So almost a decade went by, and then in 2002, it came back bigger and better than ever and was reauthorized as the McKinney-Vento Act that we all know today. But this time, along with the reauthorization, it required all schools to appoint a local liaison just to make sure that the law was being implemented effectively. So what is the McKinney-Vento Act? Well, it's a federal law that ensures the educational rights and protections of children and youth experiencing homelessness. The McKinney-Vento Act also authorizes funding for the education of homeless children and youth program. So initially, the funding comes down from California Department of Education for the EHCY program, and then that funding is distributed among the LEAs, school sites. The McKinney-Vento Act also ensures that children and youth that are experiencing homelessness have equal and immediate access to public education. It applies to the LEAs, and LEAs are defined as our public school districts, our direct and funded charter schools, as well as county offices of education. Overall, the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act provides educational support to promote school success. So let's take a few minutes to review the definition of homelessness that is used by U.S. public schools as established by federal law. So the McKinney-Vento Act defines homelessness as children and youth that are lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. The fixed, regular, and adequate standard is most often referred to as the guiding phrase when it comes to the definition of the McKinney-Vento Act. So all of you may have heard folks pose the question, does the student lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence? And again, as the guiding phrase of the definition of homelessness under the McKinney-Vento Act. However, the definition goes on to describe other living arrangements that would be considered homeless because they are not fixed, regular, and adequate. And some examples of that include hotels and motels, doubled up families, so your families who are sharing the housing with friends or family, living in a vehicle, staying in a condemned building, or a shelter or transitional facility. It also includes family, children, and youth living in trailer parks or camping grounds due to the lack of alternative adequate accommodations. So that would be housing that lacks basic fundamental utilities. So lack of running water or a flushing toilet. Public or private places not ordinarily used as sleeping accommodation. For example, a condemned building, a bus or train station, or outside at a park. Under the McKinney-Vento definition, migrant children living in these conditions would also be considered homeless. So while the McKinney-Vento Act includes children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, it also includes children and youth who are sharing the housing of other persons due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. And I just want to take a minute to reiterate, the McKinney-Vento definition differs from the HUD definition of homeless, where HUD defines homelessness as literally unsheltered, and the McKinney-Vento Act encompasses that as well as the examples I just gave. So is homelessness? few minutes to dive into the lack of fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residences. So when we think of a fixed residence, it's stationary and permanent. An example of a fixed residence would be an apartment, where an example of a residence that is not fixed would be, say, a tent. A regular residence would be used on a nightly basis, on the regular each night. So when evaluating if a residence is being used regularly, consider the relative permanence of the living arrangement. So an example of a regular nighttime residence would be a family who owns or has the ability to remain in the home long-term. An example of a residence that is not regular would be a family who is doubled up and maybe is staying doubled up with a family for a limited amount of time. An adequate residence sufficiently meets the physical and psychological needs for shelter. So an example of an adequate nighttime residence in a home would be a home that provides sufficient space for a number of people in the home. For example, a transitional housing facility or even a domestic violence shelter, while an inadequate residence would be an abandoned building. So under the McCuny-Vento Act, when we think of sharing the housing of other persons, that implies that the child or youth is staying in someone else's residence. And some questions that goes along with that is, does the family or youth have any legal rights to be in the home? Another question that could be posed is, can the youth or family be asked to leave at any time without any legal recourse? So we're going to spend a few minutes with Eddie. And during our time together this morning, we're going to meet and learn about some folks along the way and their situations and discuss how to best determine what is going on with them. So Eddie lives with his mom and stepdad. And Eddie ran away from home when his stepdad began getting a little rough with him and things began to get a little heated at home. So Eddie has been staying with his friend Sam and his family. And Sam's parents have said that Eddie can stay in the guest bedroom, but that he cannot stay longer than 1 month. So based on this information, the little information that we know about Eddie, would you consider Eddie homeless? So you can put your answers in the chat. We want to hear from you. And when you answer, you can also put in the chat why you think he is homeless or why Eddie would not be considered homeless. So let us know. And if you're unsure, go ahead and put that in the chat as well.
Quite a few homeless. Yep.
So we'll let Denise check in on the chat over there and see what our answers are looking like.
Yeah, we have quite a few homeless. We have one technically, no, he's not currently homeless. If he's unable to stay at a friend's house anymore, then he would be because his residence is not safe. We have he is homeless and they're making sure he does not establish a permanent residence. A couple more homeless. He is unhoused. Yes, due to the fact that he's living with a shared residence. He is homeless because there are limits to his residence. So the majority of these that I'm seeing are pretty in line with our thinking, I think, Gina. and the education definition of homeless.
Okay. So based on what we know, Eddie is homeless. So we know he can stay at Sam's house in the short term, but there's no legal recourse that guarantees the right to stay in the home because Sam's parents had asked him to leave after 1 month. Eddie is sharing the home of other persons. So based on what we know, Eddie is considered homeless under McKinney-Vento education. So good job, guys. Need to make that one tougher. All right. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts? We can just take a minute to pause for anything additional. All right. So moving on. Due to the loss of housing defined, just a little context. Under McKinney-Vento, it implies that the student has no personal housing available. So some questions to ask when determining if the student is homeless under the McKinney-Vento Act. Did the family or youth lose previous housing due to, and there's a variety of factors that fall under this, destruction or damage to the previous home, unhealthy or unsafe living conditions, for example, vermin or mold throughout the home, abuse or neglect, eviction or foreclosure, domestic violence, or even the absence of a parent or guardian. A youth may be on their own due to abandonment. A parent may be recently incarcerated or a similar reason. So we have another situational question for all of you. And let's spend some time with the Williams family. So the Williams family was living in their home that they purchased for the past 5 years until a Category 4 hurricane came through and wiped out their home, causing severe damage and making it unlivable. And although it was unlivable, the family continued to shoulder the burden of the mortgage payments. Unfortunately, they're unable to rebuild their home until their insurance claim is settled, which will hopefully be in their favor, but the Williams family does not know yet. So in the interim, the family is staying with Mr. Williams' brother. So based on this information, would the Williams family be considered homeless under McKinney-Vento? Again, put your answers in the chat, and Denise will let me know what the group comes up with.
You've got some yeses. Yes, they're doubled up and their home is not safe to live in. More yeses, they're homeless. Looks like so far everybody's in agreement. And I'll just add, as we're getting a few more yeses here, on occasion, we do get calls at our office too if we have a family who they own their home, but they are temporarily staying in a hotel due to extermination or because they're getting another residence built or construction purposes. In those scenarios, this would not be considered homeless. And so you kind of have to look at why they are currently relocated, or for what time period, what was the natural disaster or the living situation that caused them to stay in that temporary housing. So just to put that out there. A few more yeses here. And homelessness due to damage caused naturally. It could also be if there water or during these storms, electricity, flooding, all of those as part of the scenario, you'd want to take into account of why they needed to relocate for that temporary time frame. So far, looks like everybody, for the most part, is in agreement. Yes, that those would all be, that family would be considered homeless because they're living in an inhabitable or unsafe living situation.
I love all the context with the answers.
Yes.
That's great.
Yep.
So yes, the group is correct. The Williams family would be considered homeless because they're sharing housing with other persons due to loss of housing as a result of a natural disaster. So when it comes to economic hardship, under the McKinney-Vento Act, that implies that limited financial resources have forced the family or youth to leave the personal residence and share housing due to an inability to pay the rent or mortgage. So a clarifying question for economic hardship could be, did the hardship occur due to an accident or illness, loss of employment or public benefits, or a similar reason that forced the family or youth to share the housing of others temporarily? So this is Kelly and Donna. And Kelly and her daughter Donna were living in a 2-bedroom apartment until Kelly lost her job due to layoffs and could no longer pay rent. So they moved in with Kelly's parents to save money in order to get a place to live. Based on this information, are Kelly and Donna considered homeless under McKinney-Vento? What do you guys think?
We have a no, we have a yes. See if we get a few more. We have another no. Not homeless, living with family. Another no, a few more, yeah, kind of, we're in between. We've got almost equal, yes. So this is a good one to maybe spend a little time on. We said yes, because they're living in shared space due to the fact that Kelly lost her job, economic hardship. They're doubled up, so that would be a no. Living with family, homeless. So we're about split, even down the middle there.
There are some thoughts on this one with Kelly and Donna. Okay.
Yes, due to lack of income. No, homeless they have a stable residence.
Okay. So based on what we know, Kelly and Donna would be considered homeless under McKinney-Vento because they're sharing housing with other persons due to economic hardship. And I just want to reiterate, when we talk about doubling up and living together and economic hardship and layoffs and all of those sort of moving parts, if a family moves in together to save money or to buy a large house that they can all live in, that would not be economic hardship. So it needs to be as a result of loss of employment, loss of public benefits. When we go back to this slide, accident or illness, loss of employment, loss of public benefits, or a similar reason. So an economic hardship did not occur if I just want to move in with Denise in an effort to save money and because she has a bigger house than I do. So those are the differences between doubled up due to economic hardship and staying with somebody because we want more space. Denise, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, sorry, stuck on mute. Yeah, just to say this is by far the large gray area that everybody deals with as an education liaison. And it really is finding out, again, what Gina stated, what was the reason for them doubling up. It should be one of those immediate situations that's eviction, loss of job, a health issue, something like that, that triggered that doubled up situation. Where families are doubling up due to childcare issues or cultural issues. Those are some of the clarifying questions that the schools will have to ask those families once they're kind of flagged as being doubled up. And it does a lot of times take a follow-up phone call to get some of those questions and ask them in a sensitive way and in a confidential way is how we provide technical assistance to our districts so that they can get that information, actually make that determination.
Okay, so we have another question for you guys as we move into our countywide data and our homeless students that have been identified countywide. How many students do you think were identified as homeless in Contra Costa County during the 2021-22 school year? Now this is countywide, so we are eager to see your answers in the chat. And this is students that were identified as homeless through each school district, through their system, student information system.
And as we're waiting for some numbers to come in, I'll just share, we have 18 districts in our county in Contra Costa. And so again, all those, we coordinate with all of those districts as well as Department of Education to kind of track that data. We also have, oh gosh, Gina, do you know the current count on charter schools in our county? 25 or more?
26.
And charter schools fluctuate a little, which is why year to year, which is why I wasn't quite sure on the current number. But yeah, every county in the state reports these numbers to Department of Education on an annual basis. And so this is where we coordinate very closely with our districts to get this data. We're seeing hundreds, 500 to 800, 100, 300. And while you're entering these numbers, also keep in the back of your mind your doubled up families, because those are the ones that are a little tricky at times to determine. And we're seeing, let's see, 1,000, 3,000, over 500. I'm seeing one of these here that's pretty close so far.
Oh, I see a 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for the 21-22 school year countywide, there were 2,226 homeless students enrolled countywide. So we bolded out our 3 top sites with the highest number of homeless students identified. So Antioch Unified reported 348 homeless students. Mount Diablo reported 481 homeless students. And West Contra Costa had the largest population with 711 homeless students identified last school year. So overall, enrollment is down. But as Denise mentioned, these are not everyone, which is why collaboratively we have to continue to try and identify these families. And our doubled up families are the ones that get a little tricky. They don't always disclose that information. They may not mention it. We don't know the reason. So much like our scenario with Kelly and Donna, we don't know if that's a result of economic hardship or a cultural reason or for just childcare reasons. So it does often warrant another phone call or checking in with the parent or family throughout the school year.
And Gina, do you mind if I add something on that data slide?
No, please.
Just for context, with COVID in the last couple of school years, we know that enrollment is actually down. And so we are across the state and nationally. So we are very closely trying to monitor data this year. Typically, for the last 8 years, we've been around 2,500 to 3,200 students identified as homeless in our county. But just for frame of reference, our county alone, enrollment-wise, not homeless, but enrollment-wise, lost about 3,000 students during the past school year, just to not being enrolled after COVID. So we, statewide, within our county and nationally, are still trying to find some of those students who either never enrolled in kindergarten or just moved to a different state. So we are very closely monitoring all this data this year, but enrollment across our county decreased by about 3,000 students during COVID. So just for point of reference.
Thanks, Denise. All right. Moving on to student rights. So students experiencing homelessness have rights under the McKinney-Vento Act, and those rights include the ability to receive a free, appropriate, and public education, enroll in school immediately, even if they don't have all the documents that are typically required for initial enrollment at a school site, enroll in school and attend classes while the school gathers those needed documents that the student might not have for enrollment, and receive educational services comparable to those provided to other students according to students' need, and that's on an individual basis. Students also have the right to enroll in the local attendance area school or continue attending their school of origin. And the school of origin is the school they attended when permanently housed or the school in which they were last enrolled, if that's the preference of the parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But if the school district believes that the school selected is not in the best interest, then the district is required to provide the parent, guardian, and unaccompanied youth with a written explanation of its position and inform them of the rights and process to appeal the decision. And students also have the right to receive transportation to and from the school of origin, again, if it's requested by the parent or unaccompanied youth. So under the McKinney-Vento Act, it is required that every school district designates a local homeless education liaison. And we have put together our district liaison list, which you guys will all get a copy of, to reach out to any of the liaisons within our 18 school districts. And the foster and homeless education liaison is really the key contact in the district to make sure that students eligible in the district are receiving everything that they're entitled to, as well as being aware of their rights and services under the McKinney-Vento Act. And we'll make sure that everyone, this link provides the district liaison list for our school districts, and we have one for charter schools as well. So outreach and awareness when it comes to student rights for children and youth experiencing homelessness. These are that you can enroll in school posters, and they're provided by California Department of Ed. They're available in English and Spanish. I'm sure everyone on this call has seen them. If you are in need of some and would like them posted and you want some, please let us know and we'll make sure to get them out to you. And you can put it in the chat if you would like some, or you can shoot us an email. And the purpose of this is to just place them in highly visible areas. So parents, unaccompanied youth, and students are aware of their rights to enroll in school under the McKinney-Vento Act. So our homeless students often run into roadblocks and barriers when it comes to education. And so under the McKinney-Vento Act, we have rights in place, and those rights are immediate enrollment, assistance with transportation, tutoring, and making sure our students are provided with necessities such as school supplies, hygiene kits, and clothing as needed in order to attend and fully participate in school, and making sure that students are attending school as often and consistently as possible. And Denise has dropped some links and contact info in the chat there for the posters. Thanks, Denise. So immediate enrollment. All students, including unaccompanied youth, have the right to be enrolled in school immediately. So even if they're lacking those records normally required for enrollment. And those records normally required can include academic records, so transcripts, health records such as immunization records, proof of guardianship, proof of residency, or other documentation of any kind. Homeless students are entitled to enroll immediately, even if they've missed any application or enrollment deadlines during any period of homelessness. And enrollment is defined as attending classes and participating fully in school activities. So again, on the posters, that mentions immediate enrollment as well. But oftentimes, registrars and front desk staff will come across a family that hasn't enrolled their child simply because they think they need those records to enroll if they're homeless, and they don't. They can have immediate enrollment, same day enrollment without any of those records typically required for a student that's not experiencing homelessness. So, true or false question for you guys. Students have the right to attend their school of choice, even if they move around frequently due to housing instability.
We're getting a lot of truths. Good job.
Lots of truths.
More truths.
Denise, do we have any falses yet?
Not yet, all trues.
Hmm.
Oh, one false.
Oh, there's a false. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so students have the right to attend their school of choice, even if they move around frequently due to housing instability. And the answer to that is false. Students have the right to attend their local attendance area school or their school of origin, but not just any school of their choice because they think that's the school that they want to go to. And that brings us to school selection. So our homeless students, including unaccompanied youth, have a right to attend either the local school or the school of origin. And that's in accordance with what's in the student's best interest. And we're going to explore the concept of best interest in just a couple more slides in a bit. But the McKinney-Vento Act defines the local attendance area school as any public school that non-homeless students who live in the attendance area in which the child or youth is living are eligible to attend. While the McKinney-Vento Act defines the school of origin as the school that a child or youth attended when they were permanently housed, or the school where the child or youth last enrolled, or the school the student attended within the preceding 15 months. And it's important to know that that includes public preschools and receiving schools. So I can see things popping up in chat, so we'll just pause.
So we did get a couple questions. Yeah, I was just waiting for a moment there.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the first question that came up in the section was, can homeless students be SARB'd if they are not attending school? And so SARB'd is the attendance where you get a letter from your district or your school saying you're basically to the parent that the child has not been attending school. And it's a process that they go to. And so Gina, you can jump in here. I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, by all means, go ahead.
Okay. Essentially, students can be SARB'd for not attending school, but what we want to do is make sure we are looping in the homeless education liaison for that district, because the district may or may not know, or the school may or may not know, the family may not have been identified, and they definitely want to take that into consideration if family is highly mobile and moving around and unstably housed. But a lot of time, 9 times out of 10, I will say, when families get SARB'd, they have not disclosed that information to the school district, nor have they been working with the district liaison to make sure that they're getting the support they need to get to school, which might be the transportation assistance. It might be making sure they're enrolled at the school of best interest if school of origin, for one reason or another, isn't working. And so those are all things that happen when the identification process is in place and being used and families are aware of their rights. Did you want to add anything, Gina? Sorry.
No, I think you covered that. Anything else in the chat?
Yeah, we have a couple others on terms of school of choice or school of origin and school of residence. We had one that said this is true if it's IEP related school selection. And so IEP is the individualized education plan for students who are receiving special education services. Those ones do get a bit tricky because it has to do with funding services. But in general, in all these areas, we try to look at the school of origin first. That is ideally where we want to keep the student. That's where they're connected. And if they have special education services, even more so, this becomes important because they have services already in place. Again, you have to look at each situation very specific to that child, the services they're receiving, and their situation. And so for the most part, we do look at that IEP and where they're currently attending and if those services are working and they're able to continue getting those services with transportation support and other supports, or we need to look at school of residence, which is where they have moved to and where they're currently staying at. And the last question, I have a follow-up question. Say we house a family in a different district than the district that the kids attended when they were homeless. Can they stay at the school they attended when they were homeless despite being housed? I hope I'm reading this correctly. And so if I'm reading this correctly, if a family is placed in housing that's in a different district from where they were staying when they were homeless, by law through the end of that school year and or graduation, depending on their grade level, they can stay at the districts they were at when they first became homeless. And then again, we want to work on the identification piece, making sure the district's aware that they're being placed in housing that's supported through whether a shelter agency or what other services they're receiving. And again, that's the best interest of the child to stay at that school that they were attending. So again, these are all very specific scenarios, and you have to look at each individual student and their situation, always keeping in mind that school of origin tends to be the best scenario if we're able to continue that placement.
All right. And that is the perfect segue into best interest. So as Denise mentioned, when it comes to the best interest for the student, the school site should always presume that keeping the student in the school of origin is in the student's best interest. And Denise just touched on that. And occasionally a parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth will think otherwise, but it's typically presumed that the school of origin is in the student's best interest. And when determining best interest, it's important to consider student-centered factors. So how is the student doing academically? Are there any health or safety concerns for students? What services are available in the area? For example, does it make sense for a student? Is it in their best interest for a student who lives in Richmond to attend school in Antioch? Of course, priority is given to the parent or guardian or unaccompanied youth's request when it comes to best interest. And written explanation has to be provided if it's determined that the school of origin is not in the student's best interest. And of course, that explanation has to include the appeals process and provided in a form and manner that's understandable to the parent, guardian, and unaccompanied youth. So to ensure that homeless children and youth can exercise their right to continue attending their school of origin, the McKinney-Vento Act requires school districts to provide transportation to and from the school of origin. In the case of an unaccompanied youth, that request would need to come from the local liaison at the school district site. The school of origin transportation rights extend to public preschools as well as receiving schools. Remember, that was a definition of school of origin. And school districts must continue to provide school of origin transportation for the remainder of the school year, during which the student who is formerly homeless becomes permanently housed. So, for example, if a student was identified as homeless in October and they continue to attend their school of origin, but then they became permanently housed in April, then the district would need to continue to provide school of origin transportation to the formerly homeless student until the end of that academic school year. If the student remains permanently housed, then that student would not be deemed McKinney-Vento eligible for the next school year, but they would still be deemed McKinney-Vento eligible for the duration of the current school year. So there may be times when an agreement cannot be reached. And in these circumstances, the McKinney-Vento Act provides for the settling of disputes through the dispute resolution process. So in the event of a dispute, and it comes up between a school district and a student over either eligibility, school selection, or enrollment, the student must be enrolled immediately under the McKinney-Vento Act, that the school district immediately enrolls the youth in their requested school. So districts must provide the youth with that written explanation of the position. They need to inform the youth of their rights to the appeal process. And then that youth would need to be referred to the local liaison in order to make sure that the dispute resolution process is carried out as quickly as possible. And the U.S. Department of Education's non-regulatory guidance further clarifies that in addition to immediate school enrollment in the requested school, the student must also receive all services for which they're eligible for until a final resolution of the dispute and appeal process is finalized. So unaccompanied youth. The term unaccompanied youth can be defined as children and youth that are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. But in order to be McKinney-Vento eligible, the student must be homeless as defined under McKinney-Vento and unaccompanied. So a guardianship issue alone that is without homelessness would not automatically qualify a student for McKinney-Vento services. So you may be wondering, well, what about a student who ran away from home as opposed to being kicked out of the home? And would that student be considered an unaccompanied youth because they're not in the custody of their parent? And the answer to that is yes. So a student may be considered an unaccompanied homeless youth of whether the student was forced from the home or whether they left the home on their own volition. So in cases where the student has run away, and even in circumstances where a parent may allow their student to return home, the situation could be viewed where the student chose to leave. And while the student may have left their home on their own accord, we don't really know what's going on. The student may have left due to a difficult or abusive home environment. And in those cases, the details of what caused the separation between student and parent may not be disclosed right away because it's sensitive, right? It's private information. And your student and or parent or guardian may not want to disclose that to school district staff or shelter staff. So we can't ever assume that a student was kicked out or they just ran away until we get more information with them. So our unaccompanied youth face several issues. And one of those is not all communities have shelters, or shelters are often not an option. And even in communities where shelters do exist, a lot of times there's just not enough space to serve everyone who needs the help. So unfortunately, here in Contra Costa County, as you guys all know, there's very few shelters that serve youth under the age of 18, and our youth have nowhere to go, and it's tough. Sometimes shelter rules and policies can make things difficult. So for example, most shelters have that 30, 60, 90-day stay limit, and then the youth has to find another place to live. So they have to reset and start all over again. And our unaccompanied youth are the most vulnerable. So our youth may be unaware of where shelters are even located here and outside the county. They might be fearful of even entering a shelter altogether. And there may be people who allow youth to double up with them and then sadly take advantage of the youth or place them in harmful or unsafe circumstances. So 1/3 of homeless youth identify as being part of the LGBTQ community. About 10% of homeless teens are pregnant. And you'll see by the graphic there, 1 in 6 youth people have reported an experience of homelessness. That's almost 20%. So this graphic just further illustrates unaccompanied homeless youth and how both parts of unaccompanied and homelessness as defined under McKinney-Vento would need to be present in order to be classified as an unaccompanied homeless youth. So a way to remember that is if a student cannot go to a place the same place every night and sleep in a safe and sufficient place, and they are not in the physical custody of their parent or guardian, then they would be considered an unaccompanied homeless youth. Denise, how are we doing with chat? Anything pop up?
We don't have any questions in the chat. However, in relation to this portion of the presentation, we do have
please.
2 questions that came up in the pre-registration. One of them was, do minor children, and this could be unaccompanied, have right to receive their own case management services without emancipation? And in terms of the education services and educational case management, the answer to that is yes. We would work, or the school district or school site would work with the unaccompanied youth, much as they would with an adult who is with their child who is homeless. And so unaccompanied youth have the same rights to have a say in their educational services and school placement, what have you, and they would work a little more closely with their district liaison on that. But yes, they do have rights to that. And another question, if we come across an unaccompanied minor, what do we do? What resource can help immediately? And so Gina touched on this a little bit. We don't have a lot of unaccompanied minor shelters in our county. We have Northern California Center, which is under 16 or 16 and over, I believe. But in general, the majority of our unaccompanied minors do double up with friends or family. And what we do is we assist the districts in helping them get some access to food, access to school clothes, anything they need for school, and just making sure they have what they need in order that, whether that's transportation or services that we assist with connecting them to, and making sure that they're able to access those services. So it's kind of the case management in terms of what you could immediately help them with. Anything else you want to add to that, Gina?
Just one other thing. Any youth, any age can apply for CalFresh benefits. So typically with Cash Aid and CalWorks and Medi-Cal, that gets a little trickier. But as far as CalFresh benefits are concerned, a youth could apply and have their own case and potentially be eligible for benefits. And CalFresh benefits are accompanied by expedited services. So if a youth applied and they were homeless, the worker processing the case would need to provide services within 3 days for emergency food stamps. Okay, so that brings us to Maritza. And Maritza is 16 and has a mom who is struggling with substance abuse. So as a result, mom often has strangers in the home and is participating in some activities that are causing Maritza to feel anxious and unsafe. Eventually, Maritza concluded that she would be safer living on her own. So she ran away and is now crashing on the couch of an older friend that she met at a party last week. So given this information, how would you identify Maritza? So we will give it a few minutes and see what folks think in the chat is going on with Maritza.
We've got several homeless, at-risk homeless and unaccompanied, high-risk homeless, in crisis homeless.
All right. Yeah, Maritza has some stuff going on. So based on what we know, Maritza is in fact homeless because she left home and she felt physically and emotionally unsafe there. And she's sleeping on the couch of a friend that she met at a party last week. So that does not really qualify as having a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And I did throw in the unaccompanied there. So because Maritza is not in the physical custody of her parent, she is an unaccompanied homeless youth. So good job, guys. So some tips for successful partnerships. it's important to learn more about the education portion of the McKinney-Vento Act. So the more all of you as program staff learn about the education portion of the Act, the more they'll understand your services and be able to kind of speak the same language when it comes to speaking with the education partners, so the homeless liaisons at the school sites. It's important to share information and data on housing programs, and that's really in an effort to increase the awareness of challenges and sharing what is working, what's not working, and highlighting and celebrating successes and opportunities. But when you're working collaboratively, you can also address those gaps in services on both ends through the CoC lens and then also on the education side. Become familiar with the challenges that our homeless children and youth are facing. So identify ways that your CoC can support these children and youth. And some of those ways could be inviting your local liaison to your meetings. Have the liaisons be a standing agenda item at your educational meetings. Think about establishing an education subcommittee or a homeless youth task force within your CoC. Develop a protocol for case managers and liaisons in evaluating the best interest of the child when it comes to school placement. And then, of course, developing an MOU at your CoC. So the identification of youth experiencing homelessness is important. And it's important because we need to find these students to provide services and resources to them. But the problem that comes up is we can't serve these youth if we don't know who they are. They're not going to come right up to you and disclose their homeless situation. Sometimes we have to dig a little bit. But these children and youth that are experiencing homelessness, they have rights and are entitled to services, not only through McKinney-Vento, but through IDEA and programs like Title I. So our unaccompanied homeless youth are automatically eligible to apply for aid as independent students when it comes to the FAFSA. So they do not have to provide their parent information, and the student's federal aid package is calculated solely on the unaccompanied youth's income and assets. And it's important because it's the law for HUD-funded services and providers. So, Jamie, I added this slide for the CoC Rule 24 and listed those, and I just wanted to check in with you and see if you had anything to add or mention on this slide. Okay, so we can come back to that if Jamie has any. Oh, there she is.
Oh, sorry, my audio was not working.
That's okay.
I was saying this is like super nerdy technical language from HUD, but this is really important for you all because it's very clearly outlines for any programs that are funded by CoC or ESG funding. And you may not know, but check in with your manager. This is what's required for providers that are working with families with children. So I think Gina's covered a lot of this, but just so that you all have the actual requirements in black and white, it's here. And our, Shelby says, feel free to check in with her if you have any questions about how this applies to you or what that looks like on the ground, but just wanted to make sure folks know this is not just like, oh, this would be great. This is actually mandated under certain types of funding. Thanks, Gina.
Yeah, thanks.
And Gina, I wanted to add, I know we forgot to do our poll at the beginning. Is that something you still want me to launch right now while we're moving into the questions?
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Okay. So you keep talking and I'm going to launch it in the background.
Okay. So at this time, I just wanted to open it up for anyone who had any questions or comments. Jamie's launched the poll there, or if anyone would like to share any situations or cases or experiences that they've had. We can have a few minutes and open it up.
With a reminder that this is being recorded and will be publicly available, so please don't share any identifying information about your clients or their families. Thank you.
Thanks. No.
Gina, I'll share. We did have a question a little bit ago that I responded to in the chat, and it just had was asking if somebody is in a DV or domestic violence situation, can they move to any district? And so the response to that is no, it's not any district. It would be either if there's not a current safety situation for the student, we would want to keep them at their school of origin, and that would be working with the school to get transportation if that becomes an issue. If it is a safety issue in terms of if you think the other parent might show up at the school and that's not a safe situation anymore for the student, then we would look at the school of residence, which is where hopefully the domestic violence shelter has placed the student, or if they're in a different city or location, then we would look at the school closest to that location. And again, working as confidentially as possible and not putting anybody at risk, but making sure the student's going to be able to get to school. So those would be the two options under the law if the student or family is experiencing DV.
And Gina and Denise, I don't know if you can see, but I actually am sharing the results from the poll. So I think as co-host, I'm not sure if it shows for you. But about 55% work directly with families and children. 24% are in an administrative role supporting staff that does this work. 14% are in a family receiving homeless services, and 7% prefer not to say. So it's a good mix here. Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank everyone for spending this time with us this morning. I hope you found the webinar helpful. This is my contact information. I want to encourage everyone on the call to please reach out if you have any questions, you're looking for any additional information or resources. I'm available and happy to help. So as Jamie mentioned this morning, we will be sending out the slide deck, and please let us know how we can help in any way. Happy New Year, everyone.
We can hang on a little bit longer if folks have some other questions that they want to ask. And also,
yes, of course.
Gina, if you don't mind putting your email directly in the chat in case folks can't pull it from the slide, that would be great. And again, we'll make sure everybody gets all this information, both the recording and the slides.
Great, I'll do that now.
One more comment in the chat. It seems folks are familiar with Cali House in West, but asked if there's anything similar in Central or East County. Unfortunately for minors and unaccompanied youth, currently, to my knowledge, there is not. There's Cali.
Not.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to mention, I want to make sure folks know about the Bay Area Crisis Nursery. So it's a little different than some of what we're talking about, but if you have families with small children, I'm trying to remember, it's been a long time since I've looked, but they can provide like overnight respite for, I think, up to a month for families with smaller children, like under 5. I don't know if anybody has the most up-to-date information, but that could be a really good resource. I'm going to find their information.
They are a wonderful resource. They also have overnight, respite care. They have clothing available. They have a diaper bank available, all free of charge. And they're a wonderful organization to work with. Yeah,
John, I see your question. So they don't house families, but they can take in the children. So, for example, if a parent is having a medical issue, or they are having, some mental health crisis, or they just need a break, they can actually take in the child for a certain
up to 30 days.
Time, up to 30 days. So it's, and so this will happen sometimes where like a parent, maybe the parents are living in their car for a week. They could place their child safely with this agency until they get back on their feet. And there's some stuff about like if there's CPS involvement. But they are a great resource. I dropped their link in there. It seemed like maybe somebody else had a question, but maybe not.
I was going to say that's a good reminder for our 0 to 5 children. They are also eligible for Head Start. Head Start is federally mandated to save spaces for students or children experiencing homelessness as well. And so as providers, if you're working with a family who has 0 to 5 children, we want to make sure we get them connected to Head Start or resource and referral locally. There's subsidized childcare as well as universal transitional kindergarten. So there are early childhood programs as well that we want to help connect families to.
Denise, can you drop the CoC Kids link in the chat? Please, thank you. All right, well, thank you, everyone.
I see a question, Gina.
Oh, one
Stephanie
more.
Stovall has a question.
Hi, I put it in the chat. I was wondering, how do you donate the clothing for the homeless youth? And do they need to be new clothing, or can they be gently worn clothing?
Gina, I missed, does the Office of Ed do clothing donations to families? Because the other thing I'll say is White Pony Express is sort of our go-to for donations of good quality clothing and that sort of thing.
I do know that White Pony is not taking gently used donations right now.
Correct.
You could check with the school site. We typically don't take donations here at the county office only because we don't have anywhere to store it. But occasionally if we do come across a family in need, I usually check in with the school district or the liaison, and they usually have space at the school site.
Can I ask another real quick question?
Sure.
I know previously some of the school sites had little food banks, on site. Because sometimes families don't have the transportation or the means to get to some of our food banks. Do you know if you guys are still offering that as well?
I think that's a site-by-site basis. I know that some school sites have clothes closets and food pantries and clothing for youth and interviewing and all sorts of things, but it just varies by school site.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, a question in the chat about furniture for people once they get housing. So yes, there actually is a program with Mount Diablo Recycling. I'm going to actually put I don't think I can upload the form. So I'm going to put our email in here and let's see if I can talk and type at the same time. Not so well. So you can email me and I can get you a form. So essentially you can request any besides that one that I don't know.
Habitat for Humanity. And Jamie, for the Mount Diablo recycling program, I did send the form out, and a family was referred, and they reported back that the response was very fast and they were able to get what they needed.
Oh, that makes me very happy.
Yeah,
excellent.
That's great.
One thing to note about Mount Diablo Recycling is that we typically don't, it's like the agency has to sort of be the point people, and you can't just be like, hey, family, go pick out the stuff you want. It's really sort of coordinated through an agency referral. But they do have a lot of great stuff.
Any other questions?
And I'll just share in terms of student support. So districts across the state right now are receiving some federal funding specifically for our homeless identified students. Which is why identification is so important, because that does again entail school clothing, assistance with some food, depending on, they should be getting free food at school. But actually California is one of the only states now that just this year students will get free food whether or not you're identified as homeless. And so there's a universal food program which has just started this year, and it's wonderful. Make sure families are aware of that. And again, school clothing, school supplies, any of those things could be provided through their school site. But again, that's why identification is key. Anything outside of that, in terms of the family, that's where we really want to connect with the service providers and make sure you're working closely with the school district liaison to kind of meet those other needs.
And one thing I actually wanted to add, thank you for saying that, Denise. So I wanted to, there's a question that's in the chat we'll get to in a second. So I wanted to do a pitch for the homeless point in time count. So today we're kicking off our volunteer training. So the homeless point in time count is critical to helping us identify people, the sort of the sheer number of people experiencing homelessness. We are going to have a second piece of beyond the observational count that will happen on the 25th. We will have a whole passel of surveys that happen. And we really need people's thinking about where we should have people deployed doing those surveys. We may need some folks to help actually conduct the surveys. That all helps create the actual numbers that get used to decide things like funding. And those surveys are going to capture some of this information like family structure, are there minor children, where are people living, all of that. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to get everybody's support and engagement with the point in time count. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. There's a planning meeting on Wednesday that's actually talking specifically about surveys. And then there's also, I will drop in the registration form. Anyway, I will not bogart. Keep going. So there's a question in there about transportation.
Yes, and I just responded in the chat there. The question was, can homeless identified student get assistance with transportation / bus tickets? And the answer to that is yes, if it is for school transportation, and that is a barrier to school attendance. The law does say that that needs to be provided if it's requested. The law does not say what that needs to look like. And so again, depending on the age of the student, obviously you wouldn't give a bus ticket to a kindergartner, but we look at other options depending on the age of the student, which could be rerouting a special education school bus. It could be providing a gas card to parent if they have a car. Again, looking at those specific scenarios and working with the school site to get that transportation and make sure the student can continue attending school. But that is something provided under McKinney-Vento. Yes.
Yeah, and we ask them every month.
And just to add on with the PIT count, so school districts are required to now issue what's called a housing questionnaire once a year, at least minimum once a year. And that it's always been best practice, but it is legally a requirement now. And so if families receive that form and they have questions, maybe if you're a case manager, just be aware that schools should be once a year or twice, we recommend sending out this homeless or housing questionnaire. And that is, again, to see if they qualify for services under McKinney-Vento. So if any questions come up about that, feel free to ask us. But that really is the identification mechanism that is being used by school sites.
They don't necessarily, eventually that's get it on.
I just want to flag, I put in the chat our survey that we do at the end of every training. I also put in the point in time count volunteer registration form. So the PIT count will be early in the morning on Wednesday, the 25th. And then our point in time count planning meeting is this coming Wednesday. And I just mentioned it because if we don't capture the data, then we don't have an identified need and we don't get funding to support these families.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a happy Monday. Stay safe, stay warm, stay dry, and we hope to see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you both for great training.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your 45 minutes of your life back. We'll send out the recording and the training materials tomorrow.
Thanks, Jamie.